I am here personally right now to introduce my next guest speaker. I wanted to do that myself for Mr. Jordan Maxwell. I've known of Jordan's work for at least 5 years, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know him personally for about 2 years, off and on now. And he has become a personal hero of mine. Before that, it was, well, Batman. But you know the Hollywood movie. The valiant youth who learns of his destiny at an early age and goes out and battles the forces of evil. Jordan is that hero in the flesh, at least to me he is. And to you, once you get to know him and his work of over 40 years, both academically and experientially. He is going to lay out the groundwork today of our history, our hidden history, a lesson that we all need to know about, of things that we aren't taught, things that are here, going on, right in front of our eyes, which is the best place to hide things. And we have an exclusive tomorrow. Jordan will lay out the groundwork today, and he will bring a guest with him tomorrow. And they will bring us up to date. And he has some very interesting, profound information for this contemporary audience. So, for now, he will lay the groundwork, give you a history lesson that you are going to want to hear. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the work and the experience of a man that I would like to call my hero and friend, Mr. Jordan Maxwell.
Good, it works. I want to thank all of you for being here with me. Is this going to give me problems because I'm... Okay. Oh, yeah, maybe we can turn it down in the back. We're going to have to turn it down in the back a little bit. Okay. I was going to do slides and talk a little bit about religion, and then talk a little bit about government, and but I decided that if I were to bring slides, it's going to take me all night, because there's just so much I want to say about the system we live under. It is the most incredible array of treason, lies, crimes against the state. It's just an incredible story of how this country operates, who owns it, and consequently, as I said, if I brought slides, I wouldn't get through tonight. So I'm just going to kind of meander over some of the points I want to make, and it may not follow a consistent pattern, but just kind of follow along with me. Because the point I want to make tonight is that words are very important. We as humans are word controlled. We are word controlled humans. You can say something to someone and they will beat you up because they don't like the words. You can say something to another person and they will love you because of the words. But what you need to understand is that there's a world of difference between a dictionary definition of a word and a legal or lawful dictionary definition of a word. When you go into court, when you're dealing with attorneys and judges, the words that you use do not mean the same thing at all. Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. Here it is. Corpus juris secundum, which is a complete restatement of the entire American law. Corpus Juris Secundum, which is a huge set of law volumes in any good law library, and I photocopied this. Under the heading of attorney and client, it says, an attorney has an obligation to the courts and to the public, no less significant than his obligation to his clients. Thus, an attorney occupies a dual position which imposes dual obligations. His first duty is to the courts and to the government or public, not to the client. So the first duty of an attorney is to the courts and to the government and not to the client. And whenever the duties of his client conflict with those he owes as an officer of the court in the administration of justice, the former must yield to the latter. So anytime you might have a difference with what the judge is doing or the courts are doing, it doesn't matter. They're the boss. And the attorney works for them, not you. Then in Corpus Juris Secundum, it goes on to say under attorney and client, a client is one who applies to a lawyer or a counselor for advice or direction in a question of law. A client is also called a ward of the court in relation to his relationship with his attorney. Clients, if you hire an attorney, you're a client. And a client is a ward of the court. Look up in Black's Law Dictionary the word ward of the court, and it says an infant or person of unsound mind. According to the law, if you hire an attorney, you're an idiot. That's what the law book says. See if you can remember this quotation. For the first time, a civilized nation has full gun registration. Our streets will be safer, our police more effective, and the world will follow our lead to the future. That's it, Adolf Hitler. You know how many employees the United States Post Office has? No. How many employees did the United States Post Office have? A guess.
800,000.
Okay. All of you are wrong. 5. 5 employees of the United States of America Post Office. Now we have a privately owned company owned by a guy in England that's called the United States Postal Service, not Post Office. Postal Service is a privately owned company. It's owned by some people in England, and they have a franchise to operate here in America with your mail. So when you go into what you call the post office, just remember, it is not run by the American government. This is a privately owned corporation. And consequently, it's operating as a military unit, and that's why if you're drafted, you can go down and swear in at the post office, because it is under international military justice. So I think I want to read you something here to give you an idea about, because this is the world of occultism that I love, and this is the kind of thing that I love. I want to read you something. You probably have heard this before. Abraham Lincoln. And the reason I'm reading this is to show you that there is a world of occult power behind world governments. And most people think things just happen by chance. No way. And the whole idea is, I think, well expressed in this. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. 100 years exactly. Abe Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy both contain 7 letters. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives lost children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both presidents were shot in the head. Lincoln's secretary was named Miss Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Miss Lincoln. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both Southerners were named Johnson. Andrew Johnson succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson succeeded Kennedy, born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln, born 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald, who assassinated Kennedy, born 1939. Both assassins were known by three names: John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Lincoln was shot at a theater named Ford. Kennedy was shot in a car made by Ford called Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in the theater. I like this one. A week before Lincoln was shot, he was in Monroe, Maryland, and a week before Kennedy was shot, he was in Maryland, Monroe. Oh, I get back to this postal thing. You know that when you walk in a post office, you no longer have a postal worker. If your mail comes back to you, it says it's coming back and you should go to the Postal Service to see a retail clerk at the Postal Service. That's why they no longer have FBI pictures in the post office, and you can buy bubble gum and all kinds of toys in there, because it's now owned by someone that is not a citizen in this country. And consequently, I think probably the most extraordinary thing, well, this is a quotation from John Swington, and I'll have photocopies of this, and you can get a whole set if you wish. John Swington, the former chief of staff of the New York Times, was referred to while living as the dean of his profession. In 1953, he gave a toast before the New York Press Club in New York City, and he said this: "There is no such thing at this date of the world's history in America as an independent press. You know it and I know it. There's not one of you who dares to write your honest opinion. If you did, you would beforehand that it would never appear in print. I am paid weekly to keep my honest opinions out of the paper I am connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you would be foolish as to write an honest opinion that would be out on the streets, because you'd be out on the streets looking for a new job." And he goes on to say, "We're nothing more than jumping jacks. While our masters pull the strings, we dance." Consequently, our press, the media, is of course owned and controlled by money. In the ancient system of the Druids, thousands of years ago, even 1,000 years before the Roman Empire in Northern Europe, there was a whole system of religion and government called the Druidic system. That system exists today, right now, in this country and in the Western world. All over what we would call the Western world is a Druidic system. And if you understand the Druids and their symbols and their words and terms and their symbols in government and religion, then you will see Druidism everywhere. One of the most important symbols in the Druid religion was the magic wand, like Merlin the magician with his magic wands, and Mickey Mouse with his magic wand. Magic wands, the reference works say, were always made out of holly wood. Consequently, the holly tree is very important to the ancient Celtic Druidic system of religion. Hollywood is very important to this whole process of the manipulation of the minds of people in the Western world. I have little to no respect for Hollywood or anybody working in it. I'm very close to it. I live around it. I know many people in it, but I know what it's doing. A most important subject, well, I said words. And before I hit that, let's go to the word public in a law dictionary. The word public is the populace, the community, that vast multitude which includes the ignorant, the unthinking, the credulous, who in making a purchase do not stop to analyze but are governed by appearances and general impressions. That's the public as far as the law is concerned. Now let me at this point, well, here's one more. This is a doozy. In a law book, if you call yourself a human being, go to a law book and look up the word human being, and it will tell you, see monster. Right? So then you turn over to monster, and there it is. A lawful dictionary, a law dictionary's definition of a monster is a human being by birth, but in some part resembling a lower animal. A monster has no inheritable blood and cannot be heir to any land. Consequently, we as human beings we're not men and women. We're considered human beings. And the word human being goes back to the Crusades. When the knights were traveling across Europe on their way to Jerusalem, they were fathering a lot of illegitimate children. And of course, the offspring of a knight would inherit the father's fortune. And the church was not going to allow that. So they designated all the babies coming from the knights to be acting like they're being human, but they're not actually human. They're not actually a man or a woman. They're like being human. So consequently, we today are like that. We're just acting like we're human. And consequently, the law reflects that. Now, here's the basis for what is going on here. Cecil Rhodes, British statesman and empire builder, in his last will, it says in the reference work in People's Almanac says, in the first 5 wills, Cecil Rhodes repeatedly called for a, quote, secret society, the true aim and object whereof shall be the extension of the British rule throughout the world and eventually the ultimate recovery of the United States of America. So there's a secret society operating around the world that has as its true aim and objective the destruction of the freedom of our country. And these people are British royalty, not the English people. The English people are a beautiful people, have a very beautiful history. The country, and even the UK, all 3 of the countries are beautiful countries with beautiful people. But the British royalty, in my humble opinion, are the most evil operation on the face of the earth. I believe they're behind the drug trafficking, mafia, bloodletting, and when David Icke talks about the possibility that there might be reptilian influence there, I'm going to give you my opinion on that based on my own personal research. I think he's totally right on this. I think there's a very good case can be made for the existence of reptilians. And I totally agree that the reptilian influence on this earth is frightening in its implications. And I believe this not because David Icke's reasons. I have my own reasons that I arrived at the same place a long time ago also. So if you are privy to the kind of research that David and I are doing, you'll see what I mean. There's a lot of very powerful proof out there that something very serious is going on. Now, the main thing that I wanted to talk about today, I wanted to talk about religion a little bit at first, but I've got too much to say about government right now. So I want you to understand something very clearly. When anyone asks you in this country, are you a citizen of the United States? Okay? Now, a lot of you may have heard this. I'm just going to give you a general overall picture of this. When someone asks you in this country, are you a citizen of the United States? What you think that they are asking you is, are you lawfully in this country? Are you lawfully here to do business and be here? That's not what they ask you. The country is called America. America is the name of the country. But in the 1860s, late 1860s, a group of men got together and incorporated a privately owned company. Anyone can incorporate a privately owned company, and a group of men did. They incorporated a company, privately owned, and they called the company the United States Company, Corporation. And according to corporate law, and anyone who has a corporation or a business knows that according to corporate law, all corporations must have a president. That's the law. And it must have a vice president. And it must have a secretary of treasurer. That's corporate law. So the corporation had to have a president and a vice president. Today, when you see once a year at the State of the Union, when you see the president come out and the Speaker of the House says, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States." Everybody in this country thinks he's the President of America. America doesn't have a president. This is a corporate term used in business. The United States Corporation is a privately owned company. It's privately owned. And it's a 10-mile square that it operates in called the District of Columbia. Columbia simply means universal. This is what Catholic means, universal. When you start tracing back the ownership of the corporation called United States privately owned company, then you begin to see that if you say that you are a citizen of the United States, what you're saying lawfully is that you are an employee of a foreign corporation under international maritime law. You are an employee of a privately owned company. Therefore, if you are living in any state, such as California, and you're making money here, then what you are doing, quite literally, is moonlighting, because you are already working for and are an employee of a privately owned company called United States Corporation. But you are earning money in California. Therefore, you are a franchisee of a foreign corporation under maritime law. You're a franchisee. It's like opening up a McDonald's here. You can open up a McDonald's, but you're not the boss of McDonald's. The McDonald's Corporation is the boss. They tell you what you can sell and what you can't sell and how much it's going to be, and they call the shots. You can merely be a franchisee operating under their jurisdiction. So consequently, each one of us who call ourselves a citizen of the United States is in point of fact a franchisee of a foreign corporation, and once a year you have to pay what is referred to as the California Franchise Tax Board. Because you're a franchisee of a foreign corporation under international law. Let me explain something to you. There are two kinds of law on the earth. Basically two kinds of law. Roman civil law and maritime admiralty. Roman civil law comes from the word civil or civili in Latin, meaning the people of the Illies. The people of the Illies are the people of God, civili. And the civil law is referred to as the law of the land. But there is a higher law that governs the whole earth. That's the ones I think the reptilians are into. There's a higher law that operates on the earth, and it has nothing to do with the civil law of any country, because civil laws are different in every country. You can do things in Africa you can't do in Spain. You can do things here in America you can't do in France, because the people's law, the law of the land, is different according to the culture. But when you talk about the maritime admiralty law, what you're talking about is the law of water, the law of banks. Banking law is called maritime admiralty. And consequently, this is why, incidentally, the Statue of Liberty could not be put on land in this country. It had to be put in a port. It had to be put in water. Why? Because it's not the Statue of Freedom, it's the Statue of Liberty. Liberty is what a sailor gets when you pull into port. Because the admiral gives the captain on the board the ship ownership of your body. You ask permission to leave. And if he lets you, which he's most likely not going to, but if he allows you to leave, you have liberty. You don't have freedom. And as long as you call yourself a United States citizen, you are an employee of a foreign corporation incorporated under international law, under maritime law, and consequently you are a franchisee of a foreign corporation. They own you. Now let me show you how they own you. When a ship pulls into port, say from Japan, and brings in, say, $800 million worth of Toyotas or televisions, the first thing the captain has to do is has to give to the port authorities something called a certificate of manifest. He has to give them a certificate showing how much each car costs, whether it has 4 doors or 2, or if it's got air conditioning or not. Every car has to have its certificate of manifest, showing exactly what are you bringing into this country, how much is it going to cost our banks, how much are we going to have to pay Japan for this. And so it's business. It comes in on water. It's maritime admiralty, banking law. And so therefore each item has to have a certificate of manifest. And the ship, when it pulls into port, parks at the dock. And wherever it parks is called the berthing of a ship. The ship sits in its berth. Now, when you were born, your mother, her water broke. And when your mother's water broke, you came out, and therefore you are a maritime admiralty product. Under international law, you are a product. Under international maritime banking law, you are a product. Because you came out of your mother's water. And therefore you have to have a birth certificate. And the birth certificate has to be signed by the dock. Okay? And consequently, if you go to Sears and you buy something that's too large to take home, they'll bring it to you. And so they will tell you what time they're going to deliver the product. That's why your mother was in a delivery room. She was delivering a product under international law. Now, when you get the birth certificate, that is a certificate, a maritime admiralty certificate that shows you are a human resource. And the corporation called United States went to your mother and asked her, would you donate this body to us as a collateral for a loan? Because each birth certificate is worth, when it first started in 1933, I am told it was like $630,000 per birth certificate on the international exchange. And your birth certificate today is on the stock market. And look on the back of your Social Security card and you'll see numbers in red. Anytime you see red numbers, they represent your blood. You turn it on the other side and you'll see it in blue. Blue is maritime admiralty, the navy blue. And so consequently, you are a product that was bought. And on the birth certificate, down on the bottom right, where your mother signed, it doesn't say mother or parent. It says informant, because your mother was informing on you under maritime law. She was telling the corporation, I got a new chump here for you to own, and I don't know if you know this or not, so here's his paperwork. And it was sent to Washington, D.C. They took that birth certificate. And what happened, let me go back and explain that when in 1860s, when this privately owned company was incorporated called United States, like any other corporation that grows too fast, it started getting out of bounds. It started becoming very successful, and they wanted to move out overseas. I'm being very simplistic with this. There's a lot more to it, but I'm giving you the basics. Tomorrow is when the master will explain it to you in details. I'm just giving you the basic idea right now. But when the corporation called United States was founded back in the 1860s, it wanted to move overseas at the first of the turn of the century, in the 19th century, the 20th century. And so it started moving into Europe as a hostile takeover. They called it World War I. World War I was one large corporation called United States trying to take over other major corporations in the world, like Germany, France, etc. Each one of these countries are a corporation. So consequently, the United States was able to be successful in the corporate takeover of what the outcome of the World War I. But in the process, they lost so much money. The corporations spent so much money arming and making tanks and bullets and tanks to kill people that they won the hostile takeover of a foreign corporation, but now they're broke. Consequently, they are really in serious trouble now because they don't have money to feed the people at home in the corporation, and now they've taken on new corporations in Europe to be responsible for. So the United States corporation was in very big trouble, went to Europe and asked the international bankers if they could borrow money. And the international bankers said quite simply, no, you're bankrupt. So what have you got as collateral for a loan? And they came up with the idea that your birth certificate would be worth something like $630,000 because the banker said, how much can an individual in your country working for your corporation make from the day he's born to the day he dies on an average? And it came out to about $630,000. So consequently, the bankers made a deal with the corporation called United States to credit the United States corporation account in Europe with $630,000 per birth certificate. And this is why today this United States corporation doesn't care about how many people come into this country illegally or unlawfully. They don't care about that. They open up the borders and let them pour in. Why? Because every single person coming across that border is at least $1 million now in our bank account. And so that's why we want something called, we don't want undocumented workers. We don't care about people who are illegal coming into the country. We don't want undocumented. Because with the documents, you can cash that in. You take the, and get that money from the international banks. So consequently, the United States corporation owns you. And therefore, when you go into a court, and why don't we even go to a court? You go into a court because you play basketball and tennis on a court. Why? Because the whole idea in a court is put the ball back in the other guy's court, right? I mean, the lawyer throws it over to him, and he throws it back to him, and the judge is sitting there as a referee. He doesn't care who wins. He's going to get paid, so he doesn't care. So the whole idea in a court is a game. And consequently, any time, well, there are 2 points you need to know about this. The judge is sitting there as a referee, and it's a game. And any time in this country, 2 points very important. Don't ever forget this. All law in this country, federal, state, county, city, any and all laws in this country do not apply to a man or woman, natural-born man or natural-born woman. All law applies only to corporations. All law applies to corporations only. I don't care what it is, parking tickets, speeding tickets, anything. It only applies to corporations. But however, you have been made a corporation when you were born. You were part of a corporation. So therefore, this is why all laws, or any time you get a bill from Sears and Roebuck, from your oil company, from a lawsuit, from a judgment in court, I don't care what the bill is, whatever the legal and lawful paperwork that comes to you from anywhere will always have your name in all capital letters. It's always in all capital letters. Your driver's license, your insurance card, your speeding ticket, whatever it is, it will always have your name in all capital letters. Why? Because on the international maritime law, all capital letters means you are dead. That's why when you drive by a graveyard, you will see on tombstones the name of the people who are there. Their names are in all capital letters. Why? Because that's the law. If you're dead, your name must appear in all capital letters. This is why when you walk into a courtroom, You do not have standing. Only the attorney or the judge and the attorneys have standing. You do not have lawful standing. Meaning, if you drive by a cemetery, how many people get up out of the tombs and stand and talk to you? Nobody. Why? They don't have standing in law. They don't have a leg to stand on. Okay? And neither do you. Because when you walk into a courtroom, your name on the lawsuit or on the subpoena or whatever it is, or on the Sears and Roebuck bill or anything else, your name is in all capital letters. It means you're a dead man. When you walk into this court, your ass is mine. You understand? You are a dead man. We bought you when you were born. And that's why judges wear black robes, black ceremonial robes. That's why Catholic priests wear black ceremonial robes. That's why the rabbis wear black ceremonial robes. That's why when you graduate from high school and university, you wear black ceremonial robe. You know what black robes mean? You know where that comes from? It comes from the god of an ancient god in the old ancient Sumerian Babylonian system, the planet Saturn. Saturn was referred to as the god of the ring. And his priests were the priests of the black robe. This is why judges wear black robes. Catholic priests wear black robes. Darth Vader wears black robes. Vampires wear black robes. All the blood-sucking murderers wear black robes. No, this is a black sweater. I had someone ask me that too before, why do you wear black? Because I am the incarnation of the devil. Okay? Consequently, let's get back to serious. The ceremonial black robes represent a god, the planet Saturn, one of the oldest gods in the Hebrew system. Incidentally, let me backtrack a little bit on religion. The two most eclectic religions on the face of the earth. Eclectic means conglomeration of stuff. The two most eclectic religions on the face of the earth. Number one, Judaism. Two, Christianity. Judaism and Christianity are not what they say they are. And you better do your homework. Judaism is the most confounded, eclectic, hodgepodge of stuff you're ever going to come across. All you got to do is sit for 40 years in a theological seminary and study Judaism and Christianity, and if you're intellectually honest and are not afraid to speak out in public, you're going to know that Judaism and Christianity is the biggest bunch of hogwash the world has ever known. Period. My mother had an uncle when I was growing up. My mother had an uncle who worked in the Vatican Secretary of State's office. I'm Italian. And my mother had an uncle who worked in the Vatican Secretary of State's office. My mother also had two federal judges as uncles as I was growing up living in my hometown. And so I know the Catholic Church. I know the Jesuits. I understand the mafia. I understand La Cosa Nostra. I mean, when I saw Godfather, I felt at home. This is the way I vision life. So I know what I'm talking about. I have spent 42 years reading and studying and researching theology. That's my subject. Government is not my subject. Tomorrow I will bring the man who is the expert on this stuff, and he will really dazzle you with some things that you are not going to believe. But theology and religion is my subject. And I will tell you that I have heard many times people say, well, that there's this bad Jewish religion and there's, of course, the good Jewish religion. I say, after 40 years of this subject and looking at this is the most eclectic, misunderstood, most outrageous collection of stuff I have ever seen in my life. Judaism and Christianity are filled with astrotheology, penis worship, all the sex worship, every kind of filthy, degenerate silliness the world has ever known. And this is today the basis for our legal and judicial system in America. The law of Moses. There was no Moses. I've talked to rabbis 35 years ago. Rabbis, major rabbis. This particular one was the president of the American Rabbinical Association 35 years ago. And I said to him, he lives in Newton, Massachusetts, and I said, Rabbi, tell me, was there an Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a King David, King Solomon? Were these people real? And he says, come on, everybody's got a religion. I mean, the priests tell the Catholics they're going to heaven. You know, the Hindus tell their people something. The Jews got to have their religion. It's just a religion. It's a story. This is why the Bible's called the greatest story ever told. It's a story. It's nothing true. It's a story. And consequently, you're missing the whole point of the Bible if you don't understand who wrote it and what the encrypted story is. There's a spiritual message here, but if you're just reading the top lines, you're not getting it. People running around downstairs talking about the Antichrist. And have no idea in the world what the word Christ means. How in the world are you going to be afraid of an Antichrist and you don't even understand what the word Christ means? Ask any Christian, what does the word Christ mean? I'm very serious about this. Look it up in a dictionary, and as a matter of fact, look it up in about 30 or 40 of them. And study it for about 2 weeks, the word Christ. The word Christ comes from a Greek word Christo, which gives us Crisco cooking oil. Yeah, Pillsbury has a Crisco, which is Christo, which goes back to the word Christ. And Christ means oil. Okay? So when you say Jesus Christ, what you're saying is Jesus the Christos, or Jesus Christos, or Jesus the Christos, or Jesus the Crisco. And when oil congeals, it becomes Lord. Look up the word Lord, L-O-R-D, and the Oxford Dictionary of the English Language, and it will tell you L-O-R-D is correctly spelled L-A-R-D, Lord, Congeal Christos. Who the hell reads anymore? I mean, I spent... Now, when you look up the word Christos, it's oil. Then go to Bible reference work. Line them all up. There's about 60 of them out there. Line them all up and look up the word Christ. And they will all tell you it's a word Christos in Greek, which means anointed. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean anointed. That's what you think it means. Christo is oil. And in the Hebrew, look up in the Hebrew dictionary, look up the word oil. It's called shemen or semen. Okay? This is why if you're going to be a priest, you got to go to a seminary with altar boys. You don't have any idea in the world what was going on in the Roman Empire. You quite seriously do not know what was going on in the Roman Empire. Without a doubt, the dirtiest, the filthiest, the most obscene thing on the face of the earth is Western religion. Been the background and the mainstream for all wars in the Western world. I, for one, am tired of judges, and I do not intend to crawl on my knees. I prefer dying on my feet in preference to crawling on my knees to some judge. As far as I'm concerned, they're all traitors to this country. Attorneys. The word comes from a French word, attorne. An attorne in France was in the court of the king in France The guy who, when the king said, I want that guy's property, I want that guy's wife, I want that guy's children, and I want his horses. And so the man who was in charge of turning over everything to the king was referred to in the French as the attorney. He turned things over. He took from you and turned it over to the king. So he was referred to as attorney. And today we have attorneys. That's where the word comes from. They take from the poor and give it to the rich. As far as I'm concerned, you need to understand that the entire superstructure of law in this country is based on maritime admiralty, and the maritime admiralty is saying that you are a product. They bought you when you were born. Now what you need to do is understand that there's a whole revolutionary, radical, new understanding of how this country was founded. And if you don't understand the way this country was founded, you're never going to suspect how you got into this mess. You know, when a cop pulls you over and stops you, and he gives you a ticket, and he takes your license, and he will say, is this you? Well, it's got my picture on it, airhead. Can't you tell if it's me, right? And he says, is this you? Why? Because he needs for you to say that this is you. You are verbally agreeing that on your license is an all capital letters name. On the Maritime Admiralty, a corporate fiction. And they must have you say that this you are agreeing to be a corporate fiction under maritime law. Consequently, the entire system of government and laws is being ruled by England. Do you know why you have to have a marriage license? Why does anybody have to have a license for anything? You got to have a marriage license because sex is commerce. That's why you're doing commerce. Look it up. Look it up in an encyclopedia. Look up the word commerce. It'll tell you sexual relations is commerce. Don't think so? Wait till you go to court. Yeah, wait till the marriage doesn't work out. And when you go in, see, you're not going to go to the Lord. You're going to a judge. Why? Because it's basically commerce. It's two people providing a service. The man provides for the woman provides for the man. It's a business. And if you don't think so, if it don't work out, as I said, you're not going to God, you're going to court. And it's going to cost you some money. Incidentally, the judge rules from a bench. Judge rules from the bench. The word bench in Latin is a bank. So therefore the judge is ruling for the bank. I talked about the ancient God, and God knows I would love to talk about this for an hour. Just the ancient gods of the Phoenician Canaanites and how they were picked up by the Hebrews and brought into the Roman system, and from Rome into Europe, and from Europe into America, and today we call it Judaism and Christianity, when it is in point of fact nothing more than the old Phoenician Canaanite religion worshiping the planet Saturn. This is why Jews still go to temple on Saturn's day. And Christians go to, because they're worshipers of the sun, they go to the church on Sunday. Do you know what the word church means? Most people go to church and don't even know what the word church means. Church is an English word coming from a Scottish word, kirk. Like Captain Kirk of the good ship Enterprise. Kirk in Scottish is church in English. And this is, Kirk goes back to a Roman goddess named Mother Circe. And Mother Circe can be traced back to a Greek goddess, Mother Circe. Mother Circe is Mother Kirk or Mother Church. Go into your mythology library and get some books on mythology and look up Circe. And it says Mother Circe in the ancient Roman and Greek system, especially the Greek, that Mother Circe was able to hypnotize people, bring them into her home, and turn them into animals and feed off of them. And consequently, Mother Church is able to hypnotize people. Bring them in and bring your checkbook with you. And come in, and then they feed off of you. The church, the government, banking, insurance, the same people who gave you your international banking, the Knights Templars of the 10th, 11th, and 12th century who gave you international banking, also gave you international religion. The Pope's headdress is a fish headdress. If I had brought all my slides, I could stay here all night showing you this stuff. I think perhaps the most corrupt system on the face of the earth, and it is without a doubt the enemy of every man and woman who loves freedom and honesty, is the Catholic Church, British royalty, and this mafiosi criminal syndicate we call the United States government. All three. And back in the Middle Ages, the Pope of Rome, that bastion of all goodness, the Pope of Rome, incidentally, I got lots of stuff when I get on the Pope. I'm Catholic. I know all about the Pope. The Pope of Rome made a proclamation in the late Middle Ages that he said that the Pope is the vicar of Christ. You may have heard that term, vicar of Christ. The word vicar in Latin simply means one who stands in for. So if you send somebody to do something for you who's the vicar, he stands in for you. So the Pope said he was the vicar of Christ, which means he's standing in for Jesus. Consequently, the idea is that God created the whole heavens and the whole earth, and he owns everything on it. And so therefore he turned it over to his son, Jesus, his son. But since Jesus isn't here, somebody's got to run this place. So since Jesus isn't here, the Pope said, I will be the vicar of Christ. I'll stand in for him till he gets back. Now when he gets back, I'll turn over the whole world to Christ. But until he gets here, I'm in charge, okay? As long as you understand that, we're going to do just fine. Now the first thing the Pope did after declaring himself the vicar of Christ, made himself the owner of all life on the earth for Jesus. Jesus owns the whole earth, but he ain't here, so I do. Now, second, he made a contract with the King of England. It was a treaty of sorts, a commercial treaty of sorts with the King of England, in which he gave the possessions of Jesus, which he held as the vicar of Christ, to the King of England as a holding company, a corporate holding company, so that the whole world would be under the King of England for the Pope. So the Pope owns it, but the president of the corporation is the King of England, and that whole corporation menagerie is called the Crown. And so when you hear about the British Crown, you need to understand there's a world of difference between being English and British. British comes from a Hebrew word, berith. A berith is a contract. In the old Hebrew language, berith is a contract, and ish is a man or men. Therefore, berith-ish becomes British, man of the contract. That's why anytime you do anything of any importance in this country or in the Western world, you got to sign a contract. When you get married, you've got to have a marriage license. The same reason why attorneys have to have a license. Why does an attorney have to have a license? It's because an attorney makes a lot of money by using law books. You walk into any attorney's office, he's got all the law books. Law books, like any other book, are written by someone. Somebody wrote the books. Consequently, you cannot use somebody else's property, their written or intellectual property, to make money unless you get a signed release to allow you to use their material, their song, their music, their pictures or something. You've got to get a signed release, and they give you the license to use their music in your movie. The same is true with an attorney. He must have a license to practice law, because all law in America, in the law books, is copyrighted out of Canada, Montreal. There are 5 companies in Canada that copyright all American law. And they represent the British Bar Association, which is the British Accreditation Registry, BAR. And so consequently, your attorneys will tell you, I passed the bar. Don't believe it. I've seen them in bars all the time. They don't pass them. They go in. And when you understand how the courts work, When you say you're an American citizen, a U.S. citizen, you're not an American, you're a United States citizen. There's a world of difference. Now, the United States federal government, I don't know if you know this or not, is a corporation, as I said, and there are many documents I have to prove that. And as I said, I'll make those available to you, but you'll have to mail my office and I'll send you the whole stack of them. The United States, it says in the law book, is located in the District of Columbia. So consequently, what we call the United States is a privately owned company sitting in a particular area called the District of Columbia. And therefore, if you are an employee of that corporation, then you have to pay taxes to that corporation. When you pay taxes in this country, the federal taxes, that does not go to the American government. The American government does not see one nickel. America makes its money the way all countries have always made their money, not off of taxing the people. They make their money by business. When ships pull in from all over the world, they have to pay duties. People have to import, export companies. America, the country, makes a lot of money, but the United States corporation makes a lot more. Here it is again from a law book. It says, it is clear the United States is a sovereign entity, is a corporation. It's a privately owned company. Here's another one from on the corporations in law books. The United States government is a foreign corporation with respects to the states. Citizens of the United States do not enjoy citizenship rights. They are United States citizens, not American citizens. Now, there is a world of difference between being a United States citizen or an American citizen. Because before 1868, there was no such a thing as a United States citizen. There was a United States with the U and the S, small letters, and then America was capital letter. First letter was capital. United States of America. America's the country. So what I want you to understand is that there is a very simple way to